Hello. Have you ever heard of fan fiction? Well, you are in for a real surprise today. Some of these fan fictions may get down and dirty, and some are just straight up violent. But somewhere out there in this huge wide world, someone took the time to write a novel, and I'm here to read it. I hope you enjoy. Motley Crew. I want you to know that I did not write this, but I do hope you enjoy. Jiangin had known from the moment he laid eyes on Yunjin that he was doomed. The boy was the most gorgeous person he has ever seen. He was tall, had beautiful eyes full of playfulness, plump lips, silky hair, and immense charisma. When he smiled at Jiangin for the first time, the boy finally understood what the protagonists in those cheesy romance novels meant by saying their heart skipped a beat. He always thought they were incompetent fools with heart problems, but it turned out he wasn't any better. He was still young back then. That's why he still believed his feelings would fade away as time went on. Unfortunately, that wasn't the case at all, and contrary to his expectations, his love for Hyunjin only grew with every passing second. Obviously, the fact that the older man was as touchy as a person can possibly be didn't help either. He would always have his arms around Jiangin whenever they sat together or used the Maknae's lap as a pillow. He would frequently call him cute and help him with everything. Pair these with his funny personality and big heart, and you get the perfect man in Jiangin's opinion. After years of bittersweet pining, he still couldn't bring himself to confess. He just couldn't risk it. After all, the band's future was on the line. He didn't dare to imagine what would happen if Hyunjin was disgusted by him and couldn't stand his presence. Not to mention, he didn't want to lose someone this important. Their current friendship was much more important than his unnecessary feelings. A few days ago, Hyunjin had started working on the choreography for his Artist of the Month performance. He was practicing all day and night, barely getting any sleep, making everyone worry. He even cut his beautiful, long hair. Not like Jiangin didn't find his new look extremely hot, but that didn't mean a lot, since he always had and will find him the most attractive person in the whole world, never getting tired of his beauty. Jiangin returned to the dorm after a tiring day full of practice. Practice and practice. The others had already gone to bed, Hyunjin being the only exception, as he was probably still busy practicing alone. Jiangin was humming softly to himself while making his way towards the bathroom to take a long, warm shower and relax his sore muscles. He was just about to open the door when he suddenly felt a cold hand grab his shoulder. The scenes from the horror movie he watched yesterday immediately resurfaced. By then he could already sense the murderous intent from the bloody killer behind him. He didn't have time to think, not like he would have been able to, not when he was this exhausted, so he swiftly turned around and was about to land a strong hit on the attacker, when he finally caught a glimpse of his face. His hand froze midair, millimeters away from the murderer's face. "Hyunjin, you scared the hell out of me," Jiangin exclaimed, pretending to be mad, desperately trying to hide his embarrassment. Normally Hyunjin would have made a funny comment on his ridiculous reaction or something similar, but right now he didn't have the energy even for that. He had dark circles under his bewitching eyes, and he wore a weak smile on his rosy lips instead of his usual wide grin. Clearly, he was in a terrible condition. "I'm sorry. I didn't mean to," said Hyunjin apologetically, removing his hand from Jiangin's shoulder to the Maknae's greatest regret. "I just urgently need your aid. The choreography for the A-item isn't coming together, and only you can help me." "Me? How could I help the H-Wang?" Hyunjin was dancing. In his not-so-unbiased opinion, the man in front of him was the best dancer of the whole century, if not millennium. Jiangin's strongest point wasn't his dancing skills, so he didn't know how could he out of all people be of any use to Hyunjin. "You just have to be there. You don't need to do anything at all. Your presence is more than enough for me. I promise. Pretty please, Jiangin." And who was Jiangin to say no to his adorable pleading face? So here he was, in a studio, watching Hyunjin fiddling with his phone in order to start the music. The Maknae was sitting on the cold floor, wrapped in an oversized hoodie. It probably had some weird caption on its back. Jiangin wasn't sure. He only grabbed it on the way here, and since he was way too focused on Hyunjin, he didn't have time to check which one he had. He hadn't seen the choreography before, so he was quite excited, and all of his fatigue disappeared the instant the first chord started playing. Hyunjin was mesmerizing. All of his swift, seductive and precise movements were otherworldly. During the whole time he had his black eyes fixed on Jongin and only on him, who couldn't even breathe from the impact the dancer carried. He had always known that Hyunjin was extremely hot, but right now, because he was slapped in the face with immense sexiness like this, his brain short-circuited. He couldn't move his hungry gaze away from the man in front of him. It was like his teenage sex dreams finally coming true. This is heaven was the only thought his numb mind could produce. And when Hyunjin winked at him during a dance break, all sweaty and muscles in full view, he was on the verge of ascension, or dissension. Since passing away due to drooling over your own bandmate wasn't the holiest thing. The music gradually came to its end, and when the last notes died down, Hyunjin fell to the floor head first. After taking basically no break for days, his body eventually couldn't take it anymore. He was sleeping soundlessly on the floor, Jongin staring at his motionless figure dumbfoundedly. The intense atmosphere dissipated in a split second, and he didn't know how to react. At one moment the man was dancing like there was no tomorrow, and the next he was fast asleep. Hyunjin was truly something else. He fished out his phone from his pocket and quickly dialed Bang Chan's number. He was pretty sure he could carry the dancer to the dormitory, but just to make sure he wouldn't accidentally harm him, he wanted someone to lend a helping hand. He only told the leader that Hyunjin fell asleep in the dancing studio and he didn't want to wake him. While waiting, he carefully laid his hoodie on Hyunjin. Sure enough, there was an embarrassing caption, so Jongin couldn't help but stare at it angrily, wishing to burn a hole in the fabric. Polluting Hyunjin's beauty with this shameful piece of clothing was truly a great sin. The savior soon arrived at the scene, immediately freezing as he took in his surroundings. In the middle of the room, Hyunjin was peacefully sleeping, wrapped in Jongin's hoodie, the magnet creepily staring at him. Bang Chan's eyes began to twitch uncontrollably as he made his way towards their youngest. Young Jongin, I thought you were better than this. You should know how busy is Hyunjin these days. I know young people have an enormous sex drive nowadays, but why couldn't you wait just a few days before you attack him so fiercely? And worst of all, in the studio. Seriously, I'm deeply disappointed in you, whispered Bang Chan furiously, careful not to wake Hyunjin. The wrongly accused Jongin just started at him speechlessly with big eyes, mouth hanging open. Since he didn't try to refute, Bang Chan thought he was acknowledging the attribution and got even mad. So this is how fathers felt when they caught the bastard who stole their kid's virginity. If you don't know how to control yourself, our Hyunjin might get hurt. After thinking for a moment, he continued his lecture. In order to learn some proper behavior, you have to take part in my weekly disciplinary classes. And if something like this happens for a second time, there'll be serious consequences. After saying so, he didn't leave a chance for Jongin to explain what had actually happened. He just gently picked up Hyunjin from the floor and immediately exited the room. Jongin felt pretty conflicted, glaring at the closed door. Just when did his life become a trash rom-com? He didn't even try to run after Bang Chan. Hyunjin should clear up things tomorrow. In the first place, he didn't even know why he was here. As he could see, the dancer didn't have any problems with the choreography. He perfectly executed every single part of it. No matter how much he thought about it, he couldn't come up with any reasonable explanation. After pointlessly wrecking his brain, he heaved a deep sigh and returned to the dorm. Maybe after waking up he would realize that all of this was just a crazy dream. Unfortunately, next day it turned out that wasn't the case. What was even worse was that Hyunjin has already left the dorm when the other band members had just gotten up. Jongin only found a small letter on his oak bedside table written by him. Sorry for yesterday. I didn't notice that I overworked myself that much. Thanks for bringing me home and being there. You helped me a lot. I promise I'll make it up to you somehow. His cute little message made Jongin's poor heart flutter. He should really get a medical checkup. Although he wasn't the one to carry him back, who could refuse Hyunjin's gratitude? Also, Bang Chan, the real knight in shining armor, didn't know about this. And what you don't know won't hurt you, right? Sadly, he still didn't know how exactly he helped Hyunjin, but he was way too lazy to give it more thought. Overthinking won't do anything good. So next time they meet, he'll just ask him. He exited the bedroom with big strides and a wide grin plastered on his face. However, his happiness didn't last for long. When he entered the dining room, he found himself surrounded by fierce gazes. The other band members were already sitting by a table. In spite of that, none of them was eating. They only stared at the newcomer, who couldn't help but nervously swallow and turn towards the exit in an attempt to run away. He wasn't a fool to stay in a place where people were likely to jump at him and dig into his skin with the knives they were holding. However, no matter how fast his retreat was, there were 2 guards by the door ready to cut off his escape route. After a few seconds of meaningless struggle, he was dragged to a nearby chair. The guards from before Chambin and Jisung stood behind him, so he couldn't even dream of fleeing. Bang Chan sat at the head of the table with a serious look on his face. He resembled a mafia leader like this, making the miserable Motley shiver from fright. After thinking through yesterday's unpleasant happenings, I decided that you need to reflect on your wrongdoings in front of everyone. This way, you grasp what happens when you commit a crime of this sort, and the others will also learn from your horrible mistake. Why did it suddenly feel like he was interrogated? Bang Chan, I swear on my life I hadn't done anything to Hyunjin. Damn. That sounded exactly like he had done something. For his weak attempt to disprove what he had never actually perpetrated, he only received some pitying glances. Bang Chan was tapping on the table impatiently, large gold rings on his fingers, one eyebrow raised. Jiang's life went from the boring romantic comedy to a trash crime series in a few minutes. You should know that lying is only going to make your situation worse. Jiang facepalm. At this point he just wanted to lie down and cry. Why was life so hard on him? I'm serious. The wildest thing I've done with him is cuddling in the first place. Why were they having a discussion about his sex life? Do you think we believe that? We aren't blind, you know. We all watch edits of Hyunjin, but the time you spend drooling over thirst traps about him is unhealthy. It's evident that you desperately want to get laid by him. Since you always get what you want, we figured you have an ongoing friends with benefits relationship for quite a while now. You can't be actually together, because if you weren't, then the first thing you would do is to let the whole world know that you're planning to get married next week. Jiangin couldn't find the right words. His ungrateful friends had way too much free time to think about crazy stuff like this. Even though the probability of this happening if they really started dating was quite high, he would never acknowledge it. Knowing it was one thing, others saying it out loud was another. At this point, he seriously considered admitting his non-existent crimes. This conversation was the weirdest and most uncomfortable one he has ever had. All he could do was to hope Hyunjin wouldn't decapitate him after this. Just when he was about to give in, Minho finally took pity on him and decided to help out. Later Jiangin would have to repay it tenfold, but he doesn't need to know that yet. He suddenly raised his phone and pretended to read something, then dramatically jumped to his feet. Guys, I just received a message from our manager saying practice will start an hour earlier. After saying so, he pointed at the nearby clock. With everyone looking at the wall, he gave a mysterious wink to Jiangin. In the Motley's eyes, the look on his face looked terribly sinister, sending a shiver down his spine. He didn't know why he was reacting like this. After all, Minho just saved his life. Still, for some reason he still couldn't shake off the foreboding. After the members realized that they only had a little less than 10 minutes to get ready, they abruptly cut off the Inquisition, much to Jiangin's delight. Jiangin was hoping the incident would be forgotten soon, but when has anything worked out the way he wanted it to? Jiangin couldn't name even one such occasion, so it wasn't surprising when Jisung randomly began to sing various love songs next to him, or when out of nowhere the others inquired whether it was Motley on top or not. After the hellish practice full of similar teasings, he couldn't wait to merge straight into JYP's office to tell his boss he was terminating his contact. He would pay for the finances the company lost because of his quitting. If he didn't have enough money, which was most likely the case, then he would join the mafia. The salary there'd be pretty high, wouldn't it? His acting in the music video of Freeze was quite good, so he was confident in his abilities. Staying alive for 10 minutes seemed manageable. Unsurprisingly, he was the first to leave the studio. Maybe leave wasn't the right word to use, since he practically sprinted across the whole building ready to get in a taxi and don't stop until he reached JYP's door. However, he still couldn't beat Bang Chan, who must have been a world champion runner in disguise. He soon caught up to Jiangin, threw him over his shoulder and brought their youngest to his own studio, while shouting how nobody could escape his disciplinary classes. At this point, Jongan has already given up on getting away and on his life as well. To his biggest surprise, he wasn't Bang Chan's only student. Jisun was already there when Jongan was kindly escorted to the classroom. He was sitting on the floor, back against the mirror, laughing loudly at the unfortunate Motley. Jongan collapsed next to him. The chase from earlier drained all of his energy, along with his will to live. Jisun sympathetically patted him on the shoulder. He almost found comfort in the gesture, but just almost, since the rapper couldn't hide his mocking grin. From which corner of hell did these ill wishes called bandmates crawl out? Meanwhile, Bang Chan seated himself in front of them, a book as thick as Jongan's thigh in his hands. Good afternoon, everybody. During today's class, we're going to learn about the importance of politeness in everyday situations. Taking notes is recommended. After I finish the lecture, you need to summarize what I taught you. If you fail to give me a proper explanation, you'll receive a bit of punishment. He even changed his tone of voice, trying his best to sound like a strict teacher. Jongan suddenly reminded of the math teacher who destroyed his childhood, gave Jisun a panicked look, but the rapper only smirked at him and signaled him to wait for a while, then crossed his arms and closed his eyes, not paying any heed to the man before him. Now that the story is over, why don't you subscribe? Snoopy Dawg out.